Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving into something I bet almost everyone has felt, that deep, nagging stiffness in a joint that just will not go away, no matter how much you stretch. You know the feeling, right? You've got a shoulder or maybe a knee that just feels blocked, restricted, deep down. And you try stretching it, maybe you even try to force it a little, but it feels like something is literally stuck in the works. Well, guess what? That feeling is totally spot on. The reason that aggressive stretching often doesn't work is because you're not just dealing with a tight muscle, you're dealing with a mechanical problem happening deep inside the joint itself. It's all about these tiny, hidden movements that you can't consciously control. But without them, you literally couldn't even bend your knee.
So to really understand the solution here, we first have to get a handle on the problem. Let's dig into what's really going on inside a joint when it gets stuck. And that brings us to our big idea for today: joint mobilization. Now look, this isn't just a fancy word for massage or stretching. These are very specific, highly skilled techniques that are designed to go in and fix the actual mechanics inside the joint. It's a mechanical solution for a mechanical problem. So why do those mechanics get all messed up in the first place? Well, it could be a few things. Pain can make your muscles clamp down and guard the area. Swelling can physically take up space and block movement. But a lot of the time, it's because of adhesions in the joint capsule. Think of them like sticky cobwebs forming where they shouldn't. Or something called aberrant joint motion, which is really just a technical way of saying the joint isn't moving the way it's supposed to.
All right, this next part. This is the key to the whole thing. To really get what joint mobilization is all about, you have to understand that your body has two totally different types of movement going on all the time. So on one hand, you've got physiological movements. These are the big, obvious actions that you control. Bending your elbow, lifting your leg, turning your head. That's you deciding to move. But then there are accessory movements. These are tiny, involuntary little glides, spins, and distractions happening inside the joint. You can't make them happen. You can't even feel them. But without them, those big movements you want to do are absolutely impossible. And this is the absolute kicker. The big physiological swing of the bone is completely dependent on the tiny accessory slide and roll of the joint surfaces. So if that tiny little slide gets stuck, the big swing gets blocked. And no amount of forcing that swing is ever going to fix the slide. So what are these hidden movements exactly? Well, this gets us into the science of arthrokinematics. And trust me, it's actually pretty intuitive. Let's break down the three fundamental building blocks of pretty much all joint motion. Okay, think of a car tire on the road. A roll is just what it sounds like, the tire rolling forward, with new points on the tire constantly touching new points on the road. A slide is like slamming on the brakes and skidding. The same point on the tire is scraping across the road. And a spin, well, that's just the tire spinning in place. Every single complex movement in your body is just a really precise combination of these three simple actions. But how does a therapist know which way to push to fix that slide? I mean, they can't just guess, right? Thankfully, they don't have to. They follow a fundamental rule of biomechanics called the convex concave rule. You can think of it as the secret instruction manual for fixing the slide in any joint in the body. And here's the rule itself. It's simpler than it sounds. If the moving bone has a convex or ball-shaped end, the slide has to happen in the opposite direction of the big movement. So for your shoulder, as your arm lifts up, the ball of your arm bone has to slide down in the socket. But if the moving bone has a concave or cup-shaped end, the slide is in the same direction. It's this precise, almost counterintuitive knowledge that makes this technique so incredibly effective. Okay, so we've established that just cranking on a stiff joint or stretching harder isn't the answer. So what is? Well, that brings us to the hands-on solution and really gets at why joint mobilization is a totally different approach. This right here shows why just stretching harder can actually be a bad idea. When you use your whole leg to, say, stretch your hip, you're using a long, powerful lever that can actually jam or compress the joint surfaces together. It's not very specific. But with joint mobilization, the therapist applies a very controlled force right at the joint line itself. This lets them isolate and restore that natural slide without all that risky compression. It's safer and way more specific. So if you take one thing away from this, let it be this. Forcing a stiff joint is like trying to force open a rusty door by just pulling on the handle. Joint mobilization is like putting oil directly on the hinge. We're not just cranking on the door, we are restoring the slide that allows the swing to happen easily and naturally. So, what does this actually look like in the real world? Let's talk about how a therapist actually uses these principles to unlock a stuck joint. It's all about the dosage, just like with medicine. A therapist doesn't just go in and push as hard as they can. They use different grades of movement depending on the goal. They can use these really gentle, small oscillations just to calm down pain and get the muscles to relax. A more moderate force can be used to just take up the slack and keep the joint moving well. And only when the goal is to actually stretch that tight joint capsule do they use a stronger, more sustained force. And it is super important to know that this is not a cure-all. It is a very specific tool for a very specific problem: stiffness. If a joint is already hypermobile or unstable, the last thing you want to do is mobilize it and make it even looser. Same goes for a joint that's really swollen or actively inflamed. This technique is for stiffness, not for instability. And that really gets to the heart of it. We tend to think of mobility as just having long, flexible muscles, but true, healthy, resilient movement, it goes deeper than that. It requires that the joints themselves can perform that hidden dance of rolling, sliding, and spinning exactly the way they were designed to. So I'll leave you with this. The next time you feel that deep kind of unstretchable stiffness in a joint, maybe you'll think about it a little differently. Maybe you'll picture those hidden accessory movements, that roll, that slide, and that spin. And you'll realize that the real key to unlocking the big swing might just be in restoring that tiny, crucial slide.